Welcome to our forum discussion on roots of prejudice. When we started with the students comparing notes on their own prejudices, we got so much more material than we'd expected that this now is the third program on the subject. Obviously, many of you must have disagreed violently with some of the things the students are saying. Since we're coming to the end of the series, if you'd like to write into the World We Want at WRTV with the questions you'd still like to have answered, we'll give it a try on the final program. Let me introduce you now to the students who are here for today's discussion. From Ceylon, Jay Jansen. Jay's three main interests in life are jazz, journalism, and jive. From Vietnam comes Phan Thi Hoai Phuong. One of her ideas about America while she was still in Vietnam was that American girls all have short hair. So she cut her beautiful long hair, and now she's letting it grow again. And from France, Geneviève Martineau. Geneviève is having her first 2-week hospitality period in New York, seeing all of the things she's always wanted to see. It's even included a Chinese dinner, the first Chinese meal she's had in her life. From Denmark, Inge Stustrup. When Inge was up at Ethel Walker's school, she became the first girl in the school's history that had ever legally been excused from class to go ice skating. But it was such a nice winter day, and the ice was so good, and she was Danish, and so she got a legal excuse. Well, now, on the subject of prejudice, what do you mean by prejudice, first of all?
I would say that it is an attitude which prevents a person from considering and evaluating new evidence correctly. It is an attitude of a closed mind.
Well, to me, it's a statement you make before you even see for yourself. The result is that the less the people travel and come in real contact with each other, the more deeply the prejudices stay rooted. Mutual ignorance is the first cause for prejudices, and then generalization is another one. Many people, too, are prejudiced because their parents were.
Sometimes we're prejudiced against things because they are different, but other times we like things because they are different. In France, a blonde girl with blue eyes is a beauty, the ideal of woman. Whereas in Denmark, the boys get crazy when they see a girl with black hair and dark black eyes.
Maybe you and Geneviève better change places for a while. It's still a great success. Well, now, is it fair to ask you what some of your own prejudices are?
Well, before I came to America, I had sort of prejudged Americans. I thought all Americans to be loudmouthed, drunken spendthrifts. But now, I find how wrong I am, because I was judging all Americans by American sailors who came to Ceylon. And I should have had more common sense than to expect to see a sober, thrifty, quiet sailor. And another one of my prejudices concerns the hair. If a person has a tuft of hair falling over his brow like that, I think him to be very over-sexy and boastful, and sometimes I even think him to be a dope addict. Well, most of these impressions have been created in my mind through the movies. If you notice, most characters in the movies who are over-sexy, boastful, dope addicts, they're all portrayed by guys with hair like that. And some of my other prejudices are that Germans are boastful and try to act over-bright, and a lot of you will agree with me that women are inferior to men.
I don't agree. How can you explain that prejudice? Is that because of your education or the mentality of your country? How do you react to the situation in the United States?
I would say that I've changed my opinion slightly, because in my country, see, there's unemployment, so that the women have no opportunity to work. So therefore, I draw the conclusion, because I don't see too many women working, I think that that's because of their inferiority. But I still feel, anyway, that women are kind of inferior.
Inge, you mentioned your prejudice against Germans a moment ago.
Yeah, I never thought I had any prejudice till I came over here and lived with people who think and live and feel differently than I. But my prejudices don't have anything to do with races. But
Danes usually don't have racial prejudice, do they?
No, we haven't got any colored people in the country as part of the population creating a problem. But I have sort of prejudice against nations. First of all, Germany. I can't really get along with Germans the same way as with other people. If, for example, I go to buy something and I have the choice between, let's say, a German and, for example, an English product, then I would have no doubt about what to choose. Even if the German product was better, I would take the English one. It's so silly, and I can see it's silly, but I want to get away from it, but it's difficult. I've got a German pen pal, but my father doesn't like it at all, and I'm not really fond of telling my friends at home about it because it's German.
It's sort of what Genevieve was saying a moment ago, that a lot of prejudices come from parents, maybe. Hmm?
Well, maybe.
What are yours, Genevieve?
I'm prejudiced, as I said, against Asian and Arabs, since I think that it's kind of hard to trust them. I explain it this way, you know, our relations with Asian and Arabs have always been because we conquered and occupied their country. Of course, they tried to deceive us. That was normal, but we draw conclusions, thought they were hypocritical. And then their quietness emphasizes that impression.
How can you say that we are hypocritical? Well, we don't like you either. we also say that you are hypocritical because while you are talking about liberty of fraternity, you don't let us independence while we want it.
Well, you have it now. That's a result.
Oh, but
Would you say that your prejudice is justified? Or is it just a prejudice like I have had of Americans? Have you found out that Asians and Africans cannot be trusted and are not faithful?
Well, I think it's not true. I don't have that prejudice regarding individuals, but regarding a whole nation, you know, the people from Asia. But I would meet somebody coming from Asia, like you, for instance. You are good friends to me as much as the other delegates, you know?
well,
Thank you.
not very.
But don't you think you're generalizing a little there? You haven't met too many Asians, have you, to find out?
That's true, I agree. You know, a prejudice is always more or less false and ridiculous.
Then you would say that that prejudice is not justified.
It isn't.
Thank you.
Wong, what are some of your prejudices?
Well, before coming here, I thought that almost American families are broken up by divorce. I get this idea because I have seen many American movies and read many stories of movie stars who change husband as they change dress.
Inga, you said you had prejudices about nations. Any other besides Germany?
Well, I sort of had a prejudice against America too before I came. In Denmark, you sort of have to be against the United States and against American taste and customs. Of course, not if you are you belong to those groups who adore sports and techniques and fast cars, but you have to think that those loud American shirts are awful, and you have to think Americans are horrible, uncultured people if you want to be accepted in those so-called intellectual academic circles. If you come back from the United States and like it very much, as most of us do naturally, and you want to take something back with you, some custom, or if you come back with a crew cut, then you're considered stupidly Americanized. This being prevalent in the whole atmosphere, I was of course influenced by it, and it makes it much more difficult to accept things over here. When you have got the idea that everything over here is stupid and foolish, then it's so difficult to see the good things about it. I'm happy to be able to say that by now I've got rid of some of this prejudice, fortunately, and I hope I can make my countrymen rid of it too.
Inga, do you think that your lack of prejudice about race in Denmark is due only to the fact that you don't have many colored people there?
Well, as for myself, when I was a kid and a small kid, and I read a book, or a book was read to me, a book which many Danish children know and can quote, and so can I. And it tells about a Negro who walks along the street, and the little boy in the book stares at him, and his mother or someone scolds him because of that, and tells the boy that this Negro is just like all other people, and he has gotten his black skin from the good God. This verse, I can still quote it, and it has really always sounded in my ear when I saw a black person in the street, especially when I was small. We see them so seldom that I was curious, wanted to stare at them, but the book had told me that the black people were just like all others. And I'm sure that if this little verse had been taught all over the world from the beginning of time, then much of this tension and the whole situation wouldn't have been as severe as it is in many places in the world today.
Yes, Jim?
I think prejudices come from people trying to be superior. Like the white man, he has a crazy notion that he is superior to the colored man, and then he gets the white man's burden. He thinks that it's his duty to protect the colored man, but he should realize that the white people comprise only 1/3 of the world's population, and that only 1/10 of the world's population speak English. The greater millions of dark-skinned people of Africa and Asia are moving towards a greater independence of their own. Perhaps they hold the ultimate key to a stable peace. And the time is also ripe for a participation of all branches of humanity. I think that's one of the solutions, perhaps, to racial prejudice.
Well, I knew that there were heaps of people in Asia, but not quite so many.
Didn't you know the ratio was?
Well, more or less, but not the accurate number, and I was rather struck when I heard it.
I think Jay's even a little too high. I thought the ratio of white people to colored in the world was about 1/4. When did you first find out that we weren't in the majority in the
I
world?
must say about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, and you
Good
But
luck.
I know that we were not the majority anyway. I'm not quite so informed.
You learn something
Yeah.
from America.
You going
many things, yeah.
Phuong, are you going to let Genevieve get by with what she says about Asians?
Well, I think that we have some prejudice about French, as we think that they come to our country to seek benefits, so we don't like them. And if someone get married with a French, we think that he is bad or she is bad, very bad.
Well, we don't think that a person who married a Vietnamese is bad, but we kind of look down a little upon him. Not in the metropolis, but in the, I know that he was so in the colony itself, where it used to be a colony.
And what about the Arabs, Genevieve?
Well, you know, the thing is that in North Africa now, they act in such a way, killing people, and it gives a very wrong impression because we think they are just wild beings, and it's impossible to find an intelligent compromise with them. They just know what blood and knife and nothing else.
Jay,
Well,
do you think this compromise that Genevieve talks about is something that...
oh, well, did the French revolutionists compromise with freedom? I think that they were the first ones who were fanatical on the subject.
You didn't understand what he
No,
said?
not too well.
You said that the Arabs don't give you the impression that they will compromise. Well, I think if I'm understanding Jay correctly, he's saying, but the French revolutionists didn't want to compromise with freedom. Weren't they pretty fanatical in favor of freedom?
That's true.
Wow.
Well, we can't resolve this, I guess. Well, let me ask you then, maybe the Asians are being, as you say, too quiet and polite to really deal with the subject.
I mean, then,
Well,
what you mean is that you'd rather have a blabbermouth instead of a silent character?
Not at all, and I accept that criticism you've made very graciously, and I accept it. What did you want to say, Flo? They're proving our points against us, I'm afraid. Let me ask you about race relations and prejudice in the United States. Are they more or less complicated than you thought they would be when you got here?
Well, I should say I've seen very much many nice things about America that I'd like to tell them all about at home. But one thing has just shocked me. I found out that America, in fact, is one of the great dangers for the democracy, for the development of democracy in the world today. The Americans spread information, or propaganda, should I say, about democracy in the whole world. They give economic aid to countries which are gaining independence. But what won't happen when those countries find out that that in America they have so terrible race relations? When they hear the Americans talk about equal rights for everybody, and then they find out that that isn't even found in America, won't it then, how can they go on believing in America? And won't it be awfully easy for the communists to tell the underdeveloped countries about that and to make them lose all confidence in America?
Geneviève?
Well, before I came here, I read a book and about America as it is now, and I got the impression from that book that there were no more racial prejudices. Well, not quite no more, but very few. And of course, when I came here, I was very surprised because I saw that the situation is not at all so. One of my friends, for instance, one day told me that she wouldn't go to a party given by a Negro family. But the situation, as I saw, is much worse in the South. In the Northerners seems to be very generous, and they feel sorry for what happens in the South, and everybody tries to improve the situation sincerely. And I think that Inge has been a little severe.
I think it's bad enough when there even isn't really equal opportunities for everybody under the law. I mean, the law can't even make everything right over here. I mean, then I think it is too bad.
Yes, of course, I don't approve of it either, but I think you have been severe.
What do you think, Jay?
I don't know whether the race relations here are more or less complicated, but I came here with the idea that I'd never see a Negro and a white together. And gosh, wasn't I surprised when I found out that Mrs. Waller's secretary was a colored lady, Miss Taylor. And I also thought that I would see hotels, buses, schools, exclusively for whites or exclusively for colored people. But now I find that that's just true in the South. However, the fact that the problem of segregation exists is a black mark to all Americans who boast of a perfect American democracy. That's why we Ceylonese don't look upon America as much as we look upon Britain. I mean, how could we look upon a country that has a disgraceful thing called segregation?
What's your attitude on this, Paul?
Well, I think that's the most important thing that most people talk about is also segregation in America. And as I live in Vietnam, it's a country which is divided into two parts, with the northern part under communists. It's very easy for people in the South Vietnam to hear this propaganda against American. Well, I think that is the strongest and the most effective propaganda communism have. I have in Vietnam, all of us have heard about one incident that happened to one of the most important men of India who came to America for some meetings. And as he landed in America, he came to an airport restaurant to have lunch. And when the American saw him entering, they all came out. And so the owner of the hotel, of the restaurant, asked this Indian man to leave, because if he would sit there, nobody would come to the restaurant. and I was so surprised.
This is fascinating. You're obviously referring to the incident when the Indian ambassador went to Mexico, and something did happen in a restaurant in Texas, but it's extremely interesting to see how the story has been exaggerated and came to you in Vietnam.
Oh,
It's not totally exaggerated, but all of the Americans didn't get up and walk out. However, that's beside the point. The interesting thing you've given
Well,
us is
it's
the
the
way it reached you
propaganda.
in Vietnam. Tell me, what did the communists tell you about coming to America? Anything?
well, they say that if we came to America, we cannot stay there because Americans hate color people.
What are some of your real experiences now that you bring up the point with segregation in this country?
Well, in all the schools I've been, they were all integrated schools. But you see, I saw something which I call unofficial segregation. You know, a whole group of colored boys get together in one spot and a whole group of white boys get together in another spot. I mean, that doesn't promote integration. However, one heartening fact is that at the last school I was, New Rochelle High School, I found that there was no segregation at all. It was a perfectly integrated school. And the treasurer of the general organization, he was a Negro himself. That's a good sign, isn't it? And besides, it was the only school where I saw a Negro teacher. Perhaps you might say that this is a coincidence. Well, I hope so myself.
Everybody
And-
listening will be proud of New Rochelle.
Oh, I hope so. Why wasn't, another thing, why wasn't the Negro school we visited as well furnished, as well equipped, and as clean as the other integrated schools we've been to? Okay, say that's a coincidence itself. But this surely can't be a coincidence that 90% of the doormen, porters, street cleaners, and other menial laborers I've seen have all been Negroes. Very funny coincidence. Something's wrong somewhere, I'm sure. And about the forum we had at Richmond, Virginia, it was supposed to be non-segregated. But wasn't it pretty obvious that beside each Negro there was a vacant seat, and beside the Negro choir there was an aisle of vacant seats?
It was still an enormous thing, Jay, to have a non-segregated audience
yeah.
in Virginia. This
But-
is the only one there is all year.
But still there was unofficial segregation there.
Yes, I'm not trying to excuse it for him.
Perhaps.
What experience have you had with...
Well, in the first three schools I visit in America, I have seen white and Negroes playing and studying together. Well, in these three places, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut, there is no segregation. And I conclude that there is no segregation in America. But I still meet from surprise to surprise. When I took a trip to Virginia, I found out that once more I had wrong idea about America, thinking that there's no segregation. What a surprise I got.
This shows you can't generalize ever about a
They
small
have separate,
situation.
yeah.
What about you, Jay? Are there any prejudices in your own country? We've been talking quite a lot about prejudices in America.
Well, yes, I would say it's a type of miniature race prejudice. And as I'm not a diplomat, I would criticize my own country just as much as I would criticize America. In Ceylon, in some of the very, very remote areas, caste system is still followed. Say, if a guy of a low caste goes into a high caste man's home, he's got to remove his sandals first and proceed barefooted. On some occasions, he can't even enter the house. I mean, those are in the very remote areas. But still, intermarriage is not too possible, and well, it poses kind of a difficulty. And I nearly forgot to mention that my prejudice about part-time jobs. I wouldn't say it's my prejudice because I like to have a part-time job, but my mother wouldn't want me to have a part-time job. She wouldn't hear of it. I would be ostracized from society if I was ever caught delivering milk or papers, or working in a restaurant. They would class me as a misfit, just as they would class me as a misfit if I were to, for example, talk to someone who didn't wear Western clothes, or don't speak in English in school.
But that's a contradiction. You don't want to acknowledge the superiority of the Western countries, and you speak English, and you just greet people who have Western clothes.
That's just what I'm trying to tell you. I'm against it. It happens in the very remote areas.
But, no, you do it. You speak English, don't you?
But
Oh, yeah, I speak English.
in remote areas.
See,
No, he speaks English, well, that's obvious.
I do speak English. I don't want to be chased out from society, do I?
Well, I think what Genevieve is meaning, that if the French preferred to speak Sinhalese instead of French, there might be some basis for saying that the French believe in the superiority of Sinhalese rather than French.
Oh. Well, yeah, we kind of believe that English is superior because everybody's merging towards English now. They're trying to have that as an international language.
Yeah, it's
And
international language.
see, and those who don't know English are generally the uneducated. But somehow I don't agree with this because it's a Sinhalese country and the people should speak Sinhalese. See, I'm just giving you the impressions of my country, not my own.
Our time is getting away from us. I'm sorry. We could have done more with this. I wonder, has anybody got a final thing they want to say?
Well, I would like to say something, but it's not about how to end racial prejudice, but about how America can keep her democracy and strengthen democracy in the world. On the whole, if America wants to keep her precious democracy, Americans must give up the idea of segregation. Exaggerating segregation in America, the communists say that communism is better than democracy, and they said that they will free the weak from the strong, and but you don't know what a great danger communism is. I will tell you that the purpose of communism is not to free the world from misery, but to change man into machine deprived of personality. And so if you want to keep your democracy, you have to give up the idea of segregation. And don't forget that the Declaration of Human Rights comes from you. So try to keep these theories, beautiful theories, because they are strong army which can fight communists.
They are the strong army which fight communists. Thank you very much, Huang. We must say goodbye now until next week.